Hi, I'm Bill Murray, president of the National Coffee Association, and I'd like to thank you for this opportunity to be with you. I'd like to thank the SCA, Giannis, the whole team at the Specialty Coffee Association for this a great session, a glimpse into the future. Now, I think we should start with something with a very simple declaration. This is called a glimpse into the future, and there are people who predict the future. There are people who have crystal balls, they have tarot card decks, there are palm readers, there are futurists, which apparently is a profession. People that can predict the future, they're very, very impressive. In terms of predicting the future, well, I'm not one of them. I cannot predict the future. That's not something that I do. On the other hand, I tend to think that life is a journey, not just philosophically, but sometimes literally. If we look out the window, we can see the road signs. We can see the land, the contour of what's all around us. We can get a sense of where we are. We know where we've been. And this can help us understand where we might be going. It might give us, in some ways, a glimpse of the future. So that's what we're going to do today. We're going to look at what I think are 7 different signs that tell us about the future for coffee. Now, these signs have come to me, not through a crystal ball. I'm fortunate to be able to speak with many people in leadership positions throughout this industry. And we also do some research. Since 1950, our organization, the National Coffee Association, we've commissioned consumer research. I'm very excited to announce, as we did a few weeks ago, that we're partnering with the Specialty Coffee Association to take this research deeper into specialty coffee in particular. So what we're going to do today is talk a little bit about what the research is telling us, and also what some other things are telling us. These are all different signs and things all around us about the future of coffee. So since a substantial amount of what we'll be talking about today is based upon research, let's just spend a couple of minutes talking about this research. There's really 3 things that you need to know about the research. The first thing is that the sample, or the people that we have surveyed, they are a sample of people that are adjusted after we interview them, so that overall, we have a sample that looks like the population at large with respect to a number of key indicators: geographic region, age, gender, household size, income, and ethnicity. The other thing that's important to know about this research is the margin of error. Over the years, the margin of error may be different from one survey to another, but overall, it's somewhere between 1.5 to about 2.5 percentage points. What does that mean? It means that as we look at the research, anything that's only different by that amount year to year could very much be due to the nature of the research rather than indicative of changes in terms of what people are doing. The last thing I want to point out has to do with interpretation of the research. This research gets very, very complicated in terms of the questions that we ask people. So, for example, we can ask people, do you take a whitener or a sweetener in your coffee? Or, for example, are you drinking coffee at home or away from home? The answer to that question might be yes, meaning, yes, I drink my coffee at home and away from home. The thing is, when you add up those responses, you'll get more than 100% of the population that we surveyed. Now, normally, when you're looking at research results, you want to kind of double check and look at those numbers and say, does this add up to 100 and what is this telling us? Well, because of the complexities of coffee, you can't always look at the research and draw those same conclusions that you might expect. We need to go a little deeper. So that's the top line with respect to the research. So we're going to be looking at signs on our journey, if you will, the journey of coffee. One of the first things we want to ask ourselves is, where are we? Where are we right now? You are here, right? So the first thing to take a look at is that in the short term, over the last 3 instances of the surveys that we've done, coffee consumption is relatively stable, a little soft, but relatively stable. When you look back, though, over a longer period of time, you'll see these ups and downs. And it seems like in the recent years, we're in a bit of a soft period in terms of decline. We can look more closely at this research and we can see, just for example, in terms of what I'm addressing here, you go back to 2018, you can see in 17-18, about 72% of Americans said that they drank coffee in the last week. And that's softened to 66% in the last survey that we did. The good news for specialty is that if you look more closely, you can see that overall in the last couple of survey periods, we're seeing about a 3% decline overall in total coffee within the margin of error. And for specialty, we're seeing the same thing here. This is a 1-year period from January of last year to January of this year. So this tells us that specialty is holding its own overall against the bigger picture. So now let's turn to coffee's journey. Let's start this process of taking that glimpse into the future. What are the 7 signs that I think are out there that are telling us about what might be ahead? Well, the first one is that there's a broad economic upturn on the horizon. So looking outside the world of coffee for a moment, you can look at the headlines, you can look at what the analysts are saying. What's happened actually over the last couple of months is that many economists are continuing to revise their assessment upward about the potential for economic growth here in the United States. We're going to talk about the situation outside of the US a little bit later, but right now we're going to spend our time focusing on the US. The reason this is important is not just because it's good and economic conditions will be improving, but if we ask people, as we did over the course of the year, about their economic situation, you can see that the number of people that have told us that their financial situation is much worse or somewhat worse than it was over the past 4 months, it's gone up 11% in just a year. That means that people are really feeling the pinch of the economic situation. Now, this impacts things from a coffee perspective, like workplace coffee. If people are not going to work, there's no longer workplace coffee. And that impacts and relates to a number of other things that directly affect consumption. So as we see the prospect for increased economic activity, we know this impacts not just the amount of money people have in their pockets, but it impacts the fact that they're getting out, they're out and away from home venues, they may be back in the office or back in the restaurant or back in the factory. And this in turn gets them back into their coffee drinking habits that we saw before the pandemic. All of this relates directly to the second point. Lockdowns are easing all across the country. We can look at the numbers on a state-by-state basis, and we see that in the majority of states here in the US, the level of infections are either flattening or decreasing. This in turn is leading to a reduction in the restrictions that have limited people's ability to get out, get to work, and earn a living. So we're seeing this reduction. They're all coming very quickly now, state after state. In some cases, we're seeing almost a total revision or removal, if you will, of restrictions. In others, we're seeing a reduction, for example, an increase in the capacity limits. In other words, you can get more people into a facility. Some of these reductions are immediately effective. Some of these involve setting deadlines in the very near future, at the end of this month of May, for example. What that means, of course, is people are getting back to work, they're getting out, the restrictions are easing, is that the opportunity to again socialize over coffee is increasing. The return of afternoon coffee. When we asked people when they were drinking coffee, what was interesting in terms of where we saw the reduction was in that afternoon coffee, the coffee with coworkers, the coffee with a friend. You get together for an afternoon meeting someplace. We know coffee brings us together. Sometimes it's a moment of indulgence. You just take a little break from what you're doing. The expression coffee break didn't come about by accident. So as we see economic conditions coming back, as we see more and more people getting out because the lockdowns are easing, as we see people getting back to work, we also see that the opportunity to enjoy away from home coffee, especially in the afternoon, will be increasing. The good news here is that during this period, away from home coffee has persisted. And here's what I mean about this. When you look at where people have been drinking coffee over the course of the pandemic, it's obvious. The two places that took the biggest hits were workplace coffee and generally out-of-home coffee. But I prefer to look at the out-of-home coffee from a different perspective. Is the coffee cup 2/3 empty or 1/3 full here? I'd ask you to think about other businesses that were impacted during the pandemic. The hotel business, the airline business, Broadway musicals, entertainment parks, movie theaters, restaurants. In many cases, these businesses went to zero. People that own movie theaters right now, they're wondering if customers are ever going to come back because they've got to start from zero. The good news for coffee is that coffee never went away. It shifted. And yes, this did hurt some of us very badly. Those of us in the out of home, the takeaway business, people serving workplace coffee, food service companies. But the potential is here to come back because it didn't go to zero. It didn't stop completely. We're not starting from zero. One of the reasons it didn't go to zero is because of all of you, the adjustment that all of you made so quickly and so thoroughly to embrace different ways of getting coffee drinkers or coffee to make them feel safe, to make them feel comfortable. In particular, drive-through coffee. Drive-through coffee just took off. This is, for some people, a new way of getting their coffee. It's more convenient. But look at these numbers. From January of 2020 to January of 2021, this increase is absolutely remarkable. And when we talk about apps, people using apps, we saw a similarly very large increase in apps. Now, what I find interesting here is the reduction between September and January in app-based usage. I think we're going to have to go a little deeper on this research to understand what's happening here. I think it's not easy for out-of-home coffee venues to juggle everything they're juggling right now. The drive-through, the app, the walk-ins. There's a lot going on in these locations. Whether this reflects that people are more comfortable walking in person rather than ordering on an app and going through a drive-through, or they're more comfortable lingering in the shop, or maybe they want that contact. And we'll talk about that contact. But this is an interesting question. I think the big point here is this. Out-of-home coffee never did go away. Took a few body blows, but everyone in the industry did their best to adjust quickly, to adjust realistically, to adjust with common sense. And this bodes very well for the fact that people's coffee drinking habits have not gone away. As a matter of fact, not only have those habits not gone away, but that emotional connection is still there. When we asked Americans about what they're missing in particular, and this is a question that asked people to agree or disagree, and to what degree they agree or disagree with the following statements. 35% of the people that we surveyed said that they strongly agree or they agree somewhat, that they miss the social aspect of going out for their coffee. They miss going to their regular shops, they miss treating themselves, they remain loyal to their coffee brands. They don't think it tastes the same when they're doing it at home. So this bodes very, very well. This tells you that people are eager, that they have an emotional connection to us, to all of us who make their coffee, serve their coffee, who they speak with when they go out and they get their coffee. Of course, the question is, what can we do to get some of the folks who might be reluctant to come back despite all these good things that are happening here? So the first question is, who exactly are these people as a percentage of the population? Keep in mind that this survey was last done in January. And in terms of the pandemic, that's a long time ago. The vaccine rollout really, really took off just over the past couple of months. But at that time, it was roughly 1/3 of the people that we surveyed said that they weren't ready to come back to be out at their coffee shops until after the pandemic. There's a real pent-up demand here, even back in January. Look, almost 10%. I'm ready to get out there next week, right? Another 7% the next month, in the next couple of months. So people are ready, willing, able, eager to get out there. The question is, what more can you do to encourage people who might be reluctant to come out and visit with you and get their coffee? The good news here is that we know what these things are. In most cases, they're not terribly expensive. They're visible. I worked in food service back when I was in college many, many, many years ago. One of the rules in food service back then was we didn't really want the customers, the restaurant patrons, to see us doing the cleaning. When you're sitting there eating, you don't want to see somebody with a mop and a big old nasty mop bucket mopping the floor. That's not what you want to see. Well, that's 180 degrees. People want to see you cleaning. They want to know that you're taking care of the menu, right? Now, we'll see what impact the relaxation of some of these restrictions has on people's attitudes. Do they feel less safe? Or do they feel that the relaxation is appropriate given the disease trends? But these are things we can be doing. And most of them, as I said, are relatively cost-effective, easy, visible, and things that we're doing for the most part, have been doing. We need to keep doing them into the future. But there are some curves, despite these good signs about the future. And here's some of these curves. I mentioned earlier that I was speaking about looking at the US coffee situation. Well, we know the US is not the whole world. We know that much as the pandemic is leveling off here in the US, it's actually still raging in some parts of the world. As we look around the world, we know that many of the folks that we rely upon as part of our global supply chain in Colombia and Brazil and India, that this pandemic is still a real world nightmare, and our friends, our business partners, our suppliers, and their families are still very much at risk. This is important, of course, not just because we care about what's happening everywhere else, but it has potential real impact here in the US. The first thing is in terms of the economic recovery. We know that we're interconnected. Our supply chain, whether it's for machinery or coffee, wraps around the world. We all were reminded of this just a couple of weeks ago when the Ever Given got caught in the Suez Canal, and everybody started scrambling about how to adjust. So one question then is, as the pandemic continues to rage, what its impact will be on the global economy, and how that's going to affect all of us. This also has public health implications. The mutations, the variations, they know no border. They're everywhere. And as these pandemic situations continue in some places, it creates more opportunity for mutation and variation that can come back, for example, to the US and affect our own public health situation. So we need to keep an eye on this. We saw recently that the US government announced that it'll be exporting vaccine doses. That's certainly helpful, but there's more to it in terms of logistics and delivery and things like this. We know that, unfortunately, this pandemic has been politicized. I'm not making a political statement here. I'm simply observing that the number of people that are skeptical about the pandemic, the number of people that have reservations about vaccines generally, or people that are just weary because of the lockdown. They want to get back to normal. This too can have an impact on the months ahead. And as optimistic as we can be about the situation in the US, we're not out of the woods. We do have a ways to go here. Against this backdrop, there are a couple of things that we should continue to celebrate. One of them is coffee and health. Coffee is the original natural food drink. Coffee is the original healthy beverage. And people know it. Not enough people know it. We need to continue to emphasize this. People feel the health effects, they feel the physiological impact, but there's much that people just don't appreciate on a day-to-day basis. Coffee drinkers, for example, last year, we released a report that we did where we looked at research into coffee and mental health. Did you know that if you're a coffee drinker, you're less likely to suffer from depression in the middle of a mental health crisis driven by a pandemic? This is something that more people need to know. Now, I urge you to be careful about this. You cannot just slap a marketing message on your coffee package and say coffee's good for you. But there's a lot of other things you can do. You can be active in social media. Make sure you react to articles that are out there. You can, if you're in a retail environment, you can certainly talk to the people that come in and drink the coffee that you're serving. And this is something, especially as we become more concerned about our health and maintaining our health, either because our values are shifting or because we're in a pandemic. This is something that we need to make sure we stay focused on. And speaking of values, there's something else that's terribly important at this moment. In a pandemic, we become concerned about our own survival. We become concerned about our family members, our businesses. We get very concerned about our own situation, our local community. And this is reflected in the research. We ask consumers, what are some of the factors that would influence you and help your interest in buying a particular coffee? And one of the questions we ask, one of the statements we ask people to react to is whether they would be more inclined to buy coffee, for example, on farms that treat farmers very, very well, or coffee that's grown in a sustainable way. And you can see a reduction over the year, a measurable reduction in what people are saying about these factors and the extent to which they influence their purchase decisions. Now, one thought here might be, well, these things aren't as important as they used to be in getting the attention of consumers. I'm going to argue the opposite. I'm going to suggest that we reflect upon our values, we reflect upon our business, and if we're talking about a glimpse of the future, there's no future without the farmers and their families who grow our coffee. There's no future unless coffee is farmed and brought to consumers in a sustainable way. So, to my mind, what this tells us, it's more important than ever that we make sure that coffee drinkers are educated, not just about this, but about coffee and health, and that we continue to remain committed to the values that are the bedrock of who we are as an industry. So, as we take this glimpse into the future, here are 7 signs. I think they portend very well for the future. As my friends in China might say, they are auspicious. But there are some curves. You need to remain vigilant, especially be reminded every single day that it's a big world out there, and that what happens out there impacts us here. We're all connected. We're connected through coffee. We're connected here on this planet. And there are some things we need to really move full speed ahead with: the coffee and health message, and the fact that we are connected to the farmers, their families, and the world around us that provides the coffee that we all love. I'm Bill Murray, the president of the National Coffee Association. I want to thank you for spending this time with me, and I'm looking forward to our conversation, which is always, for me, the most interesting aspect of a presentation like this. Thank you.